What's good, everyone, and welcome back to Kaya's Commentary. And if you're new here, welcome to Kaya's Commentary. This is a podcast that offers commentary on pop culture topics, real world issues, and anything in between. This is episode 13 of my series, Picture This, where I delved into Black, Indigenous, people of color images of the past to see how that affects their representation and place in sci-fi and fantasy of today. So we've looked at quite a bit. We have looked at race as a social construct. We have looked at race and racism, its effects on Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and Arab communities. We have defined speculative fiction like sci-fi and fantasy and horror, as well as delved into what that kind of looks like for some of those communities through the years, as well as why I did this and gave you my little framework. And then we delved into some shows. We delved into The Walking Dead and a couple of characters with that. We delved into Gen V, a couple characters there. We delved into The Sandman, The Acolyte, and Sleepy Hollow. So now that we are at the end, we are at the conclusion. We have come to the end of the road. That's not how that goes. So we get to answer my questions. Research question number one. As you may recall, I posed a couple questions about, BIPOC people's places. And though I may have slipped up with not fully expressing classification of those roles, um, I hope my description of them kind of led you to where I was going with that. But regardless, they're still in that graph that I created for each, so you should still see how I place them. So to my research question, do BIPOC characters only exist in fantasy, sci-fi spaces when they exist as the help and or the monster or the villain? I answer no. We see heroes, or rather we see just, them breaking out of the help and the sidekick with characters like Michonne, Glenn, Sasha and Tyrese and Rosetta, the characters that I didn't talk about, they all become, valued members of the council during their respected periods, right? They all execute plans for the better of the community. So when they're, helping or running around doing other things, it's for the benefit of the community. They're not in this sidekick role to Rick. Now, some may have started that way. Glenn, I did put in that sidekick role. He had to grow out of that, to become his own person. But even then, he kind of had agency in what he did then. He explains that to Maggie. Michonne, she breaks out of this stoic warrior, where she may not be granted humanity because she's denied it in the way she's written, right? She breaks out of that. Um, so none of these are like helpful care. They help, but they're all valued members of their society, and they're all protagonists and heroes in their own right, and they all get their moment to shine in the show. We also see this in shows like The Sandman with Death and Daniel as Dream. So these characters, again, to that metaphorical level, they are sometimes soft-spoken. They are metaphors for evolution, for guidance, easy guidance to that afterlife. These characters are complex in their own right, and they're shown in ways that don't necessarily have to advance the white character. I'd argue, Daniel is not advancing the white character or making him better, even though he is an evolution of him. He's not making him giving him some type of story that makes him better, right? As the sidekick would, giving him some type of reason. He evolves into that. That said, in fantasy and sci-fi shows, there is this concept of Monster of the Week shows. I believe I have talked about that when I did delve into speculative fiction. So there is always the aspect of that. Supernatural, Grimm, Sleepy Hollow in a way. They have all done the woman in white. And I believe, thus far, Grimm of those three anyway was the only one to do it a bit more proper. Sleepy Hollow took a legend from it, but didn't even claim it as the woman in white. And Supernatural skewed it for its own purposes as well. And then we have Rocket Runtius from Sleepy Hollow, a Mohawk dream demon. I went looking because I liked that episode, because I've said that I like that they would delve into cultures like that. I went looking. I don't think Rocket Runtius is actually a real Mohawk legend. I do not believe that he is. So you're making up legends when you don't have to. Now, I did do some research and I couldn't really find a Mohawk legend that, fit the format of a dream demon who kind of like pushes you into that. But there are like 1,000 interesting um Native American stories from different Native American tribes. Like and I like the concept of Rock and Run Tears, but also you could have done anything. You didn't even have to attach that to the Native tribe. You could have done anything. So, and then they do it again with the Wendigo in season two. And they're having um native people. Well, I don't think the shaman in season one was. I think I read in an article that actually he wasn't. So y'all just threw something together for that one. Um, but I think in season two, Big Ash, if I remember correctly, he was of some tribe. But the Wendigo is a story about, he's this creature that's a cannibal, but it starts with like turning your back on your neighbor, so even there, kind of turning your back on your neighbor's plight and being greedy. And I don't proclaim to know the legend enough to say it, to tell it back. But it's more than just this creature that is hungry for blood. There's reason behind what he does, and it's supposed to be a story that represents, hoarding and that greed, right? And then I think they also, though he is a Wendigo, they call him a skinwalker at some point or connecting to skinwalking. And I could be wrong. I don't think they're the same. I think they're different, and I think it's part basically on the tribal area of where they are located. So I, I don't even think that's right. But even, with the Wendigo and how a person becomes to be a Wendigo, even that was skewered by Sleepy Hollow. So, no, they don't solely exist, but especially in a lot of like Monster of the Week. And there's nothing wrong with playing around with myths. There are so many interesting myths that you could get into that, open up people's, concepts and bring these uh myths to light and has a chance to center that community around that episode, right? But a lot of the times, especially of the early 2010s, they weren't doing it. So no, but yes. This leads me to question two. Do BIPOC actors receive harassment from fans in these spaces for entering these spaces? I'd argue yes. So, the acolyte, whether or not they see the harassment, like if it's like with the aspect of Michonne's so ugly, there's no way Rick could have gone with her. He should have stayed with this white woman, or he should have stayed, or the lighter skinned black woman is also much prettier than her. This concept of pushing towards that whiteness, and whiteness is, beautiful. Um, that takes a toll if they see that, right? So for being in that space, for being a love interest to Rick, the love of his life, he says that she receives harassment. As far as like backlash or, from some type of pushback, I think about Nicole Bahari, and it seems like there was this like effort to not rock with her from day one. We can debate back and forth, but I believe that Abby Mills was not written to be a black woman and just ended up being a black woman, and it didn't go over as well with a lot of people behind the scenes. In which case, why did you hire her? Because you didn't have to. I don't. guess. Um, but because she's in this role, she's being labeled as hard to work with. There are rumors that she bit a hairdresser, right? She has to have these doctors come in to say that she's really sick and she needs to rest. So, yes, all of this just from being in the space. And you can have a conversation, be like, oh, well, what did she do? What did she do? I don't know, man. Would you ask that of a white character? Like, to that point, you said she said she was sick, but then they bring in doctors to make sure she's really sick when she got sick around the same time her co-star got sick. And you believe his sickness, maybe it's the same sickness. Why is she faking it all of a sudden, right? So, would you ask that of white actors? So, I do believe like being in the spaces isn't always the safest environment because of that system of whiteness. Um, we get more diverse, but also because these worlds are supposed to, they're not supposed to have messaging, but they can. The most popular images and mediums in these areas, Star Trek, with talking about anti-Vietnam or sex or religion, and the first one of the first black-white interracial kisses on TV at the time, the Twilight Zone, and it being created as a form of protest for Emmett Till's murder. Like, it's never been devoid of race, right? Like it's never been not connected to race. So where does the system of whiteness come from in these areas that you have to harass people and be like, this is not my Star Wars, this is not my Star Trek, this is not my Narnia, whatever the case may be. I do believe that actors receive harassment from fans and from creators for being in this space, and it boils down to this concept of this system of whiteness where you need to be the center of it all, and that's just not the case. In Star Wars, oppressive systems, and rebels pushing back against oppressive systems. You can't always be the rebel and the person to push back. Historically, it's not true, right? Like, there are many other people of color who are pushing back against oppressive systems who actually look like you. So, this notion that you have to be the center, that you have to be the hero, it taints the fantasy, sci-fi, horror, speculative fiction area, and that can lead to harassment, I believe, from actors, from fans and creators sometimes by two actors in these roles. That leads us to three. Are BIPOC characters othered or sidelined because of any potential real life harassment? I would argue yes. Again, thinking about Abby Mills. So, whatever went down that there was this immediate dislike, instead of just like letting her go or going to different actors, you kept her and then you started punishing her, according to the book and her own words, right? Um, you didn't invite her to the DVD commentary. You didn't follow her on social media. You were sidelining her like she is not a very real important character in this show. As far as in the show, season two kicks off and we get Katrina, we get Holly, we get Abraham, we get um Henry. And by no means am I saying that they shouldn't have had a place. I personally feel like Sleepy Hollow, for all its like family drama, it didn't need, I feel like they could have had a place, but it didn't need as much of that, right? We have Katrina, she's a woman at a time. Unlike Crane, she's not adjusting. She low-key, high-key still in love with Abraham and feeling guilty over it, and then feeling guilty of like her son. So that could pull her to that side. She's also seeing that Crane is in love with Abby, so that could be pulling her to that side. Crane being in love with Abby is slowly drifting to her side, and Abby being, the woman in love with a married man, and that can lead to Jezebel stereotypes, but if done properly, not really. There's your mess though, right? Like you have this complex, I'm in love with a married man, the married man is in love with me, the married man's wife is in love with her ex-flame, and we all just stuck here. very complicated. We didn't need the adding of Henry's our son and we have to save him. She could let that go. She could let that go. Um, but I said all that to say there Abby is sidelined for all of this instead of focusing on the actual mess that, if you want to have your show a little messy, there you go. Something else that I noticed is that, she's sidelined for Katrina. One of the complaints that Abby gets is that her t-shirts are form-fitting, and so you see, her breasts and her cups, bustier and pushed up. And it's like, oh, this is such a ill, icky thing. They don't wear shirts like that. And then Katrina gets this bustier or whatever, this corset or whatever, and pushing up her girls, and it's fine. Bessie, almost called her Busty, Bessie Ross has corsets and all this other stuff pushing up her girls, and she's this badass with this sword, right? This cutlass, right? So I find it ironic that you're sidelining this character for this character while also this character who's been sidelined is getting flack for outfits that this character is also wearing, right? So I do believe that they can be sidelined because of the real life disdain. Also, Frank Irving, so season one, a little kooky, but very successful. I think I keep saying this, but I believe I read somewhere. So after the airing of like its third episode, it got renewed for a second season. It was that good. People were that impressed with it, kooky as it may be. So I believe in the book Burn It Down, Orlando Jones is like, hey, so because he's pumping his own money into this from his own production company, he's doing all these videos to promote the show. He's captain of SSI Ickaby. That's, Crane and Abby ship name. So he's like, hey, can I get a little bit more money? And they're like, hey, no. And he's like, hey, gotta go. So when he dies in a blaze of glory, I believe that's him, right? That's his idea. He says, okay, if I gotta go, I'm gonna go in a blaze of glory. But he's sidelined also for family drama when, we could have had the complicated family drama of Irving and his family being brought into it. I don't think that it was bad that Crane's family was in there. I feel like the black characters were sidelined for the white character story when they all should have had a place because it should have been split between Crane and them and Abby and them and Irving and them, kind of like it was in season one. Um, so yes, I do believe because of real life, harassments, this can change the outlook of the character, the way they dress, or the way they talk, or, them in the story at all. So this leads me to four. Can BIPOC people be seen as the heroes in these stories? That depends. That depends. I can't answer a yes or a no because when I say can they be seen, I don't mean are they placed in the hero protagonist role. I mean, do you see that character and see them as this, brave, complex character who's going to do the right thing for their people, even if the right thing is the hard thing? They're that person, right? And not just by people who look like them, but by people like of outside. On one hand, I want to be like, kinda, yeah. So Abby, people like to say, like that commenter that I read earlier for Sleepy Hollow was like, of course, with this username, Black Girl Magic or whatever it is, of course you're gonna make it about race, right? But a lot of white fans connected with Abby. And so when she died, a lot of white fans rage quit the show because they also saw her as one half of the heroes of the show. They connected with her. She is seen as a hero. Frank Irving can be seen as this hero protagonist, right? He's fighting the horsemen of war with a sword. I never used a sword before. When he walks around in the police department, he got two guns holstered to his side, strolling around like he owned the place, which he do. I mean, he don't, but he do. Um, so these are positioning them in lenses where they look heroic or they look like the heroes. Finn from Star Wars, he came into the show and he looks like the movie, and he looks like a hero, right? And even as he's sidelined for Reylo, he's still out there doing heroic stuff. He's still out in the field. It's just it's slight backstory to Raylo. So yes, but then we look at Finn and it's like you kind of backslid him for Raylo. And I do get Raylo. I'm sorry, Kylo Ren and Rey's, ship name. I'm sorry, I do. But I get a whole bunch of people. So I just feel like the solution to that is for Rey, Kylo, Poe, Finn, oh girl from the second and third movie. I can't remember her name. I can't remember her name. I feel like they should all have a party, and Rose too. They should all just have a party. That's what I feel like. But all that to say, they can be placed in these positions. They can be lensed in these positions where, there's a cape flying behind them and they look heroic. But are they? Are they complex beings that are offered the same grace as white heroes, right? Like, if Rick is a hero in The Walking Dead, despite his brutality, like, can Michonne get that same level, if that makes sense, right? So, despite his, especially, let's say, no, we'll keep it post happy go lucky officer. He's shown as strong. He's shown as somebody who will do whatever it takes for his family. He's shown as having to make the hard decisions, all the traits of a character, of a hero character. Now we get to Michonne, and is she given that same grace? Can she be a leader? Or Glenn? Can Glenn be a leader? Or is he going to be this selfish person only thinking about Maggie and getting everybody else killed? Like, I think they can be placed in the hero roles. I think they can be lensed, captured in the hero roles. I think it really depends on if they can actually be seen as the heroes by people that don't look like them, and sometimes even people that look like them. And it all goes back to that system of whiteness. And I'm just not sure that that system in some cases will ever be beat out. Star Wars is this, story about the rebels overcoming an oppressive system. And for some reason, you as a white person flock to that when historically I'm not saying you individually would be the Nazi, but like historically, your people or people who look like you, because we're getting a little messy here, but people who look like you would be the oppressors, are real worlded. So we root for the rebels in Star Trek or Star Wars, and then we get to reality, and we as Americans, how many Americans support the Israel's assault and occupation in Palestine, right? How are you rooting for the rebels in shows and movies like Star Wars, but then you get to reality and you're the oppressor, or you agree with the oppressor, right? This system of whiteness that needs you to be the center of it because you can't be in real life, okay, but you could at least try to be, you don't have to agree with the occupation of the Palestinian people. But all that to say, it's complicated and I can't fully answer that question. I think that they can be placed, and I think it really depends if you have a good writer, because all this to say, I do believe caricatures of old have a lasting impression. Abby becomes a mammy, basically, and that's a direct link through the past of the characters that I've mentioned, right? And whether that's intentional or not, it had its influence, and you decided that this black character, this black woman character, who you used to build as the, co-lead, is now really kind of a babysitter, a wise guide, somebody who focuses more on the mission than she does her own romantic life. And it's all in the service of the white man. If you do not understand the negative connotations of that, you don't need to be a creative. So, those are my four research questions. Those are how I feel that I have answered them and can be answered. What's next? I feel since this system of whiteness is so ingrained in our society, and I don't believe that, despite the history of speculative fiction, even in the past, it's, been tainted or engrossed in that system, right? It's just that there were people aware enough to try to push back on that. So I don't know if it'll ever like if we'll ever be able to strip that. It's just look at the Acolyte and how people react to Star Wars and Disney Star Wars now, despite the fact that the films of the past just I'm not saying that the Star Wars, the originals, and the original prequels aren't great. I'm not saying that, but and I'm also not saying that they didn't do anything for their time. They did. They were influential for their time and they set a precedent for now. We can see that. But also, they're not as great. Like the whole Luke, I am your father. And then in reality, it's Luke, I'm your father. I didn't kill your dad. I'm your dad. Father? Really? Search your heart, you know. You are like it's a little underwhelming. It's a little underwhelming. Um, so all that to say, there's I don't know if it's ever gonna like be stripped. But what I can say is that it's important to continue to push back on the system of whiteness, especially in all medias, of course, but especially in these medias that are supposed to be limitless. Like, yes, you casting a black woman as Death and then portraying her as this soft-spoken person, it matters, but it's also like if you had cast a white person, you're not showing that difference, right? If it had been a white person who was soft-spoken and then it goes from a black person, are they still going to be soft-spoken, right? Like some s race matters in it, so I don't want to say it doesn't matter. But when you're doing colorblind casting, you're doing it by the notion of we're being diverse and race doesn't matter. And then you get to the story and it matters. So I believe pushing back against that system of whiteness by creating our own. And I kind of hate the whole just go create your own argument because I should be able to go to Netflix and get my own published as opposed to having to, go to some indie publisher or whatever to do it, right? Because that's what go do it your own self kind of looks like for a lot of up and coming creators. So, I don't really fully agree with that notion. I feel like it's used wrong in that notion. But that said, yes, do create your own, where you show people as being complex and pushing against these stereotypes, Sinners and Get Out, Us, and there are, of course, other smaller projects, that I'm kind of running out of time against. But I do believe creating your own and being a part of that project, whether you're just writing it and you sell it to someone, make sure you retain some level of creative, project creativeness for that project, be it a consultant or, you're on the set, whatever it may be. You need to be there to have that story told and also continuing to call out caricatures when you see them because you still see them today. The magical Negro, Abby kind of falls into the magical Negro. She has magical properties, but more than that, Bonnie Bennett falls into this magical Negro stereotype. She's the black best friend who only uses her powers really to help her white counterparts. She doesn't get much love when everybody else is, right? She is there to serve them with her powers. Abby, I call the mammy because although she's not plus size, she gets desexualized despite that everybody has a crush on her. She becomes this caring figure for Crane. And on one hand, it is funny that she's the, breadwinner for Crane. So that's not what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about the notion of, my job was to carry you forward. No, your job was to serve by him and y'all will be victorious or defeated together. Your job was to go where your family couldn't, right? So I call her a mammy because, or her representation a mammy because that's what it is. Continue to call that out because pushback of that does have its effect. When we get loud enough, we get heard. And even if it's just you know, a placement or whatever, it's something, and then take that something and continue to break that down. Get into these areas if you can. Otherwise, continue to be loud and always continue to show up for projects that are created by people, our own people. Um, because, yes, much like the documentary Latinos Beyond Real said, if one fails, unfortunately, it has the burden of ride or sink. So if one fails, oh, they'll all fail. We have to make sure these things succeed, and we have to make sure that they are done properly. So I believe that those are the ways forward. That's really all I have. So thanks for staying with me through this 13 episode journey. Always, as always, if you like this video, leave comments down below and let me know anything you found intriguing, any of the shows and characters you attached to. Be respectful. We can have a conversation with one another, but only if we are respectful. With that, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.